I really love the color design in Frieren. It's so subtle that it really immerses you in the story, which is so important when just one color that is too saturated can remove you from the entire world that's carefully created by these artists. Color design in animation is super important because it sets up a consistent set of rules for color within the world. With more complex color callouts usually belonging to the main characters, it's important to focus a show's budget on the main character of the story. Color design can be anything from effects, props, and character outfits, as you can see in some of my works from She-Ra and We Baby Bears. But I wanted to specifically talk about the color design of eyes in Frieren. Shakespeare said, "The eyes are windows to the soul," and I feel like they're so well thought out in Frieren, they tell a whole story on their own. So let's dive into it. Frieren's eyes are a beautiful 3-step flat color gradient of blue, green, and yellow, kind of like part of a rainbow. The color designers for Frieren could have kept it to one hue, going from dark green to light green, but they decided to make her eyes multiple colors, which makes sense since she's the main character. This works well, and never gets too distracting because they keep the eye colors super desaturated. Looking at the numbers in the color toolbar, you can see it gets more desaturated the lighter the colors get. What I think is really cool is that for some shots, and I'm not entirely sure why some shots have this and some shots don't, is that there is a hint of red at the top of the iris. This brings the colors used into a 4-step gradient, more like a rainbow of colors, with the red, yellow, green, and blue, although not in that order. And this is really beautiful, especially in the close-ups. The extra value shift at the top of the eye gives Frieren's eyes more roundness and depth, and could possibly be the reflection of the supersaturated red inner eyelid that we see in a photoref of green eyes. What's interesting is that when I see shots of Flamme, she has the same eye color pattern as Frieren, which makes sense, since in the flashbacks, Flamme is kind of the main character some of the time, and since she isn't in any shots with adult Frieren, the similar color palettes don't compete. One cool thing I noticed when comparing their character sheets from the anime is that the color design of their clothing is basically similar. Like Flamme has like mostly a white dress with and gold and red accents in the jewelry. Frieren has like overall a white color palette with gold and red accents too, and the black and Flamme's shoe can be kind of seen in Frieren's black tights. I think it's really cool because in that way, color design tells a story how, Frieren learned her magic from Flamme. So in a way, their magic is very intertwined, and their characters are very similar, as seen in the color design. They both have the same type of earrings, so maybe Frieren inherited the earrings from Flamme, and that's a little story that hasn't been told in the anime yet. So now we have Fern's eyes. What makes her design different from everyone else's eyes is her lighter colored pupil, and everyone else in the show has a black pupil. This makes sense since she's the second most important character in the show. Fern's eyes have just kind of one hue and they're focused in the purple color zone. I think this makes her stand out, but also fits her personality since she's normally calm and restrained, and it gives her eyes a glassy-eyed look, which is kind of fitting. Compared to Frieren's eyes, which have 4 unique color hues, Fern's eyes only hue shift in the purple color spectrum. They both have 4 color steps. As you can see in some close-ups with Fern's eyes, there's like a little red tint on the top of the iris as well, which is similar to Frieren's, which goes to red at the top of the eye. But because the color in Fern's eyes are so similar to each other, even though there's like 4 distinct hue shifts, they're all like so close to each other, the iris reads mainly as one color, purple. I think this works really well with the character hierarchy because Frieren is the main character, so while Fern's eyes are complex and detailed, they don't stand out as much as Frieren's. This is important since they're in the same shot a lot for so many scenes in the anime. So at a glance, it needs to be clear that Frieren is the main character and Fern is the secondary character. Okay, so next up we have Stark. You can see the color design of his eye is so much more simple than Frieren and Fern's. It's a reddish color hue with only 3 steps, but I feel like it just goes from like kind of like a darker red to a light red to a lighter red. And in his close-up so far, I haven't noticed any extra color on top of his iris. This makes sense even though he's part of the main party, he's not a main character like Frieren or Fern. So when they're all in the same shot together, in terms of color design for eyes, Frieren and Fern seem more important than him, which is true to the story. Okay, and then we have Himmel. His eye color design reminds me of Frieren's in that they have a 3-color flat gradient that goes from blue, green to yellow. But upon closer inspection, it's much more desaturated than Frieren's and lighter in value. And we never see that extra sliver of color in the iris in his close-ups, which is like the red in Frieren's eyes. And that makes sense, since Frieren is the main character, you wouldn't want his eyes to be like get as complex as Frieren's eyes can get. The color scheme reminds me of the beach for some reason. I don't know, I think it's all the desaturated hues. I like that the color design of his eyes is similarly detailed in terms of hue steps with Frieren. Like they kind of go around the color wheel similarly. Because so like whenever he has close-ups with Frieren, their eyes have a similar level of detail. And this makes sense since they are the main romantic relationship in the show. And even though he's, spoilers, no longer in this plane of existence, he's still one of the main characters. So ranking these eyes from simple to complex, you can see what I'm talking about. And then even just like ranking the color wheels by themselves, I feel like what I'm talking about becomes even more clear. Well, anyway, I hope this sums up why I think the color design in Frieren is A+, enhances the beauty of the show. And as a counterpart, I wanted to mention the color design of Marciel's eyes from Dungeon Meshi. I think they did a really great job. However, I think in terms of color design, the green, in a lot of scenes, the green in Marciel's eyes is a little too distracting, and it takes me a bit out of the world of the manga. They made her eyes this bright green, and at times it becomes fairly saturated. For me, this ends up butting heads with the other saturated colors that come up in the show, whether it's the saturated reds in the food, or even the red accents on her color outfit. And because red and green are complementary colors, this means you're like fully saturating two opposite sides of the color wheel, and it becomes really distracting to me. It kind of reminds me of like Christmas a lot when I see this happen in a shot. But I feel like it could kind of have been a little more desaturated to fit her more in the world of the show. Kind of like how Laos's eyes are like kind of more of like a flatter comic book look. But that's just my personal opinion. Yeah, so when I see Laos, Chilchuk together with Marciel kind of stands out since the guys have more simpler eye designs. But for me, this doesn't fit with the story since when I read the manga, I felt like they were all equally main characters since they were all part of the same dungeon party and working together. Like, it was Laos's sister that got lost in the dungeons, so I think by de facto he felt like the main character of the book, since we're also like in his head a lot, like thinking like, what does he think of the monsters' recipes, like monsters, what they would taste like, and how cooking is, like the main part of the show. Director friend even pointed out how Marciel's character animation has extra movement to her. I think the decision was probably made to have Marciel's eyes stand out in any shot she's in, since she's the main girl character and a fan favorite. I also noticed in some of the later episodes, Kabru's eyes also have this issue for me and I feel like I could see this butting heads in future shots, since his eyes are so bright. They're like have this inner illumination. I could see it drawing too much attention for Marciel and Laos's eyes when they're in the same shot together. And he's not even in the main dungeon party, so it's a little confusing to me how they're like prioritizing the color design of the main character's eyes. But besides that, I really love the anime, and I can't wait to see more episodes of it. Well, anyways, hope you enjoyed this deep dive into color design in anime eyes. This was just research done on my own, so I can't say for sure what the thought process was for any of the color designers on these shows, but it was fun to think about, and I think I learned a lot from it. And I think overall both shows look beautiful, and I can't wait to see more episodes from Dungeon Meshi and Free Run.